James Harden is arguably the most divisive player in the entire NBA. For reasons that I'll get into in this video, most people are either for or against him in a pretty dramatic way. It seems like almost half of the daily debates that are had amongst NBA fans have to do with Harden's skill level compared to other players, his free throw shooting habits, his overall offensive game, and the validity of his production, whether or not he and his team are fun to watch / good for the NBA. There are just so many conversations to be had about this guy. But one thing that isn't an argument is his place among the best players in the league over the last few seasons, if you're counting the MVP race as a good indicator of his standing. Coming into this season, James Harden had ranked in the top 2 of NBA MVP voting 4 out of the last 5 years, with 2018 being his only MVP win to this point in his career. Back in 2015, he lost out to Steph Curry despite a significantly higher points per game average, though Steph did lead Golden State to 67 wins. In 2017, he lost out to triple-double machine Russell Westbrook, despite impressive stats of his own and leading his Houston team to a significantly better record than the Thunder. And then last year, he once again got second place, this time to Giannis Antetenounmpo, despite improving upon his scoring average significantly from his MVP winning season the year before and posting the second highest single season points per game average of the three-point era. But even though it might not sound like it, I'm not here to make excuses for why Harden has only won one MVP to this point in his career, despite having a legit argument to win it 4 of the last 5 seasons. Because I think there's a case to be made for both Harden as well as the actual winners in each of those seasons. The year that Curry won it over him, Steph's team had a better record, and they ended up being the better team in the end as they went on to win a title that year. And you can't just give the award to whoever scored more points. The Westbrook win is probably the most polarizing MVP race in recent memory, and likely the one that most people think Harden should have won instead, simply because his team had a better record. But Westbrook did have a historic statistical season. And then last year when Giannis won it, the same better record argument stood, even with the crazy scoring numbers that Harden was pretty much forced to put up in an effort to keep an injured Rockets team afloat. No, what I'm here to talk about today is why I believe that James Harden will never win another MVP in his career. Yes, this is the guy that I just put out a video about last week in which I predicted that he would break Kobe's 81-point game at some point in his career. That guy is never going to win another MVP again. And there's a couple of different reasons for this, and the first is simply voter fatigue, and that just means that people don't really want to vote for James Harden for MVP anymore. His top 2 finishes in 4 out of the last 5 seasons is ridiculously impressive, but a lot of times people just want something new, and that's a big reason why a lot of players don't win multiple MVPs, and that's a big reason why Luka was so quickly thrust into MVP conversation this year in addition to his outstanding play, and why Giannis was put at the top of the list so quickly at the beginning of last season as well. And I think it's pretty clear that Harden has to work that much harder to get recognized for his achievements and his accomplishments, not only because he won an MVP already, but because he's been in the MVP conversation for most of the last half decade. And I talked about that in my preseason video in which I predicted that Giannis was going to once again win the MVP, because even though Giannis did just win it, sometimes you do have back-to-back winners, and that's much more common to see than a guy that won it before and then win it again in a non-consecutive year. And the second part of this is, what exactly would James Harden have to do from a statistical or a record standpoint to win an MVP again? Because this guy continues to push the envelope on what we believe was possible in terms of a points per game scoring season in the modern era of the NBA. We were supposed to leave these 35 plus point per game scoring average seasons back in the past of past eras of the NBA, but James Harden is making it his own personal accomplishment at this point. And at a certain point, whether you like it or not, we become numb to these kinds of performances. Harden's putting up 40 and 50 points in a single game almost weekly at this point, and so he has to put up like 60 or 70 at a certain game for us to really start to notice, and that also extends to his point per game averages. So my argument here is, if he hasn't won an MVP for last season's performance and doesn't appear to be the front runner this year either, what exactly would he have to do from a statistical standpoint to end up getting people's attention again? Like, where is the threshold? At what point would we say, okay, these statistics are just too much, we can't ignore them anymore, James Harden has to be the MVP because he's averaging 40 and 10 or 45 and 12? At what point would we have to just say, okay, we don't really want to, but James Harden is going to be the MVP this year? And part of the reason that people don't give him as much credit for his stats is because they believe that the system that he plays in gives him an advantage from a statistical standpoint, as if there's 20 guys around the NBA that could do what he's doing from a points per game standpoint if they just played in Houston. And again, that's exactly the reason why I didn't pick him to win MVP this year in terms of my preseason video where I picked Giannis instead. What else would he have to do at this point to really get our attention? If he didn't win the MVP last year when he's averaging over 36 points per game, then when would he ever actually win it? And his answer to that question, at least so far this season, is to continue to push for even more points per game, up near 40 points per game on average every single night, which is just incredible. But for a lot of people, they still have guys like Luka and Giannis and LeBron and even AD higher in their MVP rankings right now, which just further proves the point that I'm making. And my point here isn't to say that people are wrong or that these points and these concerns aren't fair. It's just going to show how difficult it's going to be for Harden to win another MVP throughout the rest of his career. And then the last part of this is just people don't like James Harden and they don't like his game. Everybody perceives this guy as someone that just flops all the time. All he does is shoot free throws, even though statistically it's been shown that in terms of a percentage of his points per game from free throws, he's not even the top guy in the league. Still, people don't like the fact that he flops. And I will openly admit, yes, of course James Harden flops to get points. Absolutely, you can't argue against that. However, and I've said this for a couple of years, it's not James Harden's job to score points in a way that's going to make people like him. It's James Harden's job to score points. End of sentence. And it's the ref's job to call the game correctly and in a fair way and get the calls right. So if James Harden has found a way to fool refs into calling fouls for him so that he can score more points, so that his team can win more games and they can be in a better position to win a championship, then he's doing his job. So even though, yeah, it can be annoying to watch a Rockets game and just see Harden parade to the free throw line, that doesn't mean that I have anything against him, even though it's not my favorite style of basketball. Which gets into my next point. People kind of think this guy's boring to watch sometimes. Even though he's putting up 40 and 50 points in a given game, people know what he's going to do. He's going to come down, he's going to dribble the ball for 8 to 10 seconds, he's going to shoot a step back three, or he's going to get to the rim, or he's going to try and get somebody to foul him, and occasionally he's going to kick it out to somebody and they're going to knock down a three. You can close your eyes and guess one of those four things and you'd be right in 70% of the possessions that James Harden is on the floor in a Rockets game. So people just don't find it all that entertaining, and you need that fan interest in order to really drive an MVP campaign. Whether you like it or not, voters are influenced by what the fans think, by what the public thinks, and the fans and the public don't really want another Harden MVP. And even though a lot of these things you could argue are unfair at times, there's just no way that he's going to be able to shake this narrative of a flopper that would only average 10 points per game or something if he never got to the free throw line. And unfortunately, that's just going to make it really difficult for him to win the MVP ever again. And so when you combine these three factors, yeah, I feel confident in saying that it's never going to happen. James Harden's never going to win an MVP again in his career. He's over 30 years old now, and at some point, I'm assuming he's going to start to decline. Not everybody's going to be able to be LeBron and continue to play at a near MVP level into their mid to upper 30s. It's just not going to happen, and at some point, he's going to slow down, and this is probably the last year, or next year maybe, is going to be the last year that he's going to have a real chance at the MVP. And again, if he's averaging 38 a game this year and people don't think he's the MVP, I don't know what else he would have to do. I don't know if it's just the fact that his team had so much more team success the year that he won the MVP because they had the best record in the Western Conference. I mean, I guess that's fair. If he, if his team was winning 65 games this year or on pace to, then maybe people would give him more credit. I don't know. But I also want to emphasize at the end of this video that I'm not sitting here apologizing for James Harden. He's really not one of my favorite players around the league, and I don't disagree with a lot of the narratives around him. But at the same time, I feel like we don't give this guy nearly enough credit. Like, you can say all those things about the free throws. You can say whatever you want about the system. You can say whatever you want about the stats. But when you just sit there and just recognize the sheer volume of his production, you have to give this guy credit, and you really can't take that much away from him, even though, again, I don't think he's going to win another MVP in his career. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, like a James Harden video that I did last week when I talked about him potentially winning 100 points in a single game, I think that's one of the best videos I've done in a while, so if you guys missed that, then please be sure to check that out. But like I said, that's going to be the end of today's video. Once again, my name is Tucker, and I will see you all next time.